Sophia had always been the strong one, the one everyone in the neighborhood turned to for a warm smile and a helping hand. A single mother of 25-year-old Liam, she had raised him on her own through every scraped knee and sleepless night, every school play and soccer game. They were a team, the two of them, a fortress built on love and mutual reliance. But tonight something felt different, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Liam looked up at her with a weariness that tugged at her heartstrings. "You should get some rest," she suggested, trying to keep her voice steady. He nodded, his eyes drooping with exhaustion. She led him to her bed, tucking him in with a warm blanket that had been passed down from her mother. As she lay beside him, she felt the cold seep through her own body, but she didn't dare move to claim the blanket for herself. She laid against the bed, covering herself with a heavy coverlet to combat the cool radiance of the day. Liam lay there. She told herself it was just to keep him warm, but she knew there was more to it. The house had always felt too big when it was just the two of them, but tonight it felt as if the walls were closing in, the silence echoing with a newfound weight. Time seemed to slow down as they lay there together. Together, the gentle tick of the clock in the hallway seemed to grow louder with every passing second. She could feel the warmth of his body next to hers, the steady rise and fall of his chest as he breathed. She tried to focus on the mundane, the comforting normalcy of it all, but her mind was racing with thoughts she didn't want to acknowledge. And then she felt it, his arm around her, pulling her closer. She froze, unsure of how to react. Was it just the innocent embrace of a son seeking comfort, or was there something more? The air grew thick with unspoken tension, a palpable force that seemed to hover just out of reach. Sophia's mind was a jumble of conflicting emotions, confusion, fear, and a strange, undeniable warmth. She searched for the right words, the perfect excuse to pull away, but they remained trapped in her throat. And then she felt it, his hand moving up her arm, his fingertips tracing a path that sent shivers down her spine. Her eyes roamed over Tessa's hand. They rested on her wrist. Her hands dropped to her sides. She wanted to believe it was an accident, a simple shift in his sleep, but deep down she knew it was more. She stared at the ceiling, her heart pounding in her chest, and wondered if she was imagining things, if she was reading too much into this moment of quiet solace. Suddenly, the stillness was shattered by the shrill ring of the doorbell. Both Sophia and Liam jumped, the tea breaking like a dam. She scrambled to her feet, her legs wobbly with nerves as she made her way to the door. Mark, their reliable neighbor, stood on the doorstep, a concerned look etched on his face. "Everything okay in here?" he asked, his eyes sweeping over them both. "Creative Dharma?" "Yes," Sophia managed a forced smile. "We're fine, just a bit cold, I think." Mark stepped inside, offering to check the heating. As he worked, Sophia felt Liam's gaze on her, a mix of embarrassment and something else. Was it anger? Jealousy? She couldn't tell, and it unsettled her even more. They had never been a family that kept secrets from each other, but suddenly there was a wall between them, built brick by brick from the unspoken. When Mark finally left, Liam remained in his room, the door a silent barrier between them. Sophia sat on her bed, her mind a tangled mess of doubt and confusion. She knew they couldn't ignore what had happened, but she didn't know how to begin the conversation. She heard the soft creak of the floorboards and turned to see Liam standing in the doorway, his eyes searching hers. "I don't know what to do," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "These feelings. I don't want to mess things up." Sophia's heart ached for him. She didn't know what to say. didn't know if there were words that could ease the tension that had grown so thick it was almost tangible. But she knew one thing for sure. Whatever was happening between them, it was real, and it was powerful, and she feared it would change everything. They decided to take things slow, to tiptoe around the subject like it was a sleeping beast that might wake at any moment. They resumed their usual routines, cooking dinner, watching movies, sharing stories from their days. But the air was charged, every touch a spark that threatened to ignite something neither of them wanted to admit. Days turned into weeks, and Sophia found herself lost in thought, her mind drifting to moments that seemed like they belonged in someone else's life. Every interaction with Liam was tinged with a newfound awkwardness, as if they were both walking on eggshells, afraid to shatter the fragile balance of their relationship. Liam's eyes were closed when she finally dared to look into him. The distance in his face made his eyes distant and stiller. She would catch him looking at her, his gaze lingering a beat too long, and she'd quickly avert her eyes, her cheeks flushing with a heat that had nothing to do with the chilly weather outside. One evening, as they sat in the living room, the silence grew so heavy it was almost suffocating. The TV droned on in the background, a sitcom laugh track punctuating the tension. Sophia couldn't stand it anymore. She took a deep breath and turned to him. "Liam, we need to talk." He looked up from his book, his eyes meeting hers with a weariness that made her stomach twist. "Okay, Mom," he said, setting the book aside. "It's confusing." Her heart pounded as she searched for the right words, but all she could manage was a question. "What happened that night?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, an infinite possibility one created by nature. He sighed, his eyes dropping to his hands. "I don't know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Sophia felt a tear slip down her cheek, and now Liam took a moment to gather himself before speaking. "I still need you," he said, looking back up at her. "But I'm scared. This isn't how it's supposed to be." They sat in silence for a long time, the air between them charged with an electricity that made it impossible to ignore the gravity of their situation. They were both adults, capable of making their own choices, but the lines between mother and son, between comfort and desire, had become blurred. Finally, Sophia reached out and took his hand. "We'll figure it out," she said, her voice shaky. "But we need to be honest with each other. We can't pretend this isn't happening." He nodded, and she could see the relief in his eyes. They talked long into the night, sharing their fears and their longings. They talked about the future and the past, about love and family, and what it meant to truly belong. They didn't come to any grand revelations or easy answers, but for the first time in weeks, Sophia felt a semblance of peace. But as the days grew shorter and the nights grew colder, the tension grew stronger. They were like two magnets, repelling each other even as they were drawn together by an invisible force. It was as if every step they took was one step closer to a cliff edge, and neither knew if the other would catch them if they fell. And then one night, it all came to a head. Liam knocked on her door, his voice tight with emotion. "Mom, I can't do this anymore," he said, his eyes filled with a desperation that tore at her heart. "I can't keep pretending." Sophia knew what he meant, and she knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. She opened the door and took a deep breath, ready to face the storm that had been brewing between them. "Neither can I," she whispered. And with that, they stepped into the unknown, hand in hand, their hearts beating in a rhythm that was both terrifying and thrillingly new. The warmth of the bedroom enveloped them as they sat on the edge of the bed, the familiar space now feeling foreign and charged. They looked at each other, the gravity of the moment weighing heavily on their shoulders. Liam leaned in, his eyes searching hers for permission, for understanding. And when she didn't pull away, when she didn't reject him, he kissed her. The kiss was soft, tentative, as if they were both afraid that if they pushed too hard, the delicate bond between them would shatter. But as Sophia's arms wrapped around his neck, pulling him closer, she knew that there was no turning back. The lines had been crossed, and they had crossed them together. Their kiss grew deeper, more urgent, as the weight of their shared secret lifted from their chests. They had been dancing around it for weeks, afraid to acknowledge the undeniable pull that had grown between them. But now, with the barrier of doubt crumbling, they gave in to the passion that had been smoldering just beneath the surface. Their hands roamed over each other's bodies, exploring the curves and planes they had known so intimately for so long, but had never dared to touch in this way. Each caress brought a new wave of desire, each kiss a deeper connection that neither of them could have ever anticipated. It was as if they were discovering each other for the first time, yet with a comfort that only came from years of shared laughter and tears. Sophia felt a strange mix of guilt and exhilaration as she lost herself in Liam's embrace. It was wrong. She knew it was wrong. But in that moment, it felt so incredibly right. The love she had for him as a mother had transformed into something more primal, something that she didn't fully understand but couldn't deny. They undressed slowly, the chilly air making their skin prickle with goosebumps. But as they lay together, their bodies pressed tight, the cold was forgotten. They were lost in each other's warmth, their hearts racing in a silent symphony of need. The intimacy they shared that night was unlike anything either of them had ever experienced. It was a blend of comfort and desire, of protection and vulnerability. It was a dance of love that had no clear beginning and no end in sight, just the raw, unfiltered truth of two souls entwined in a way that defied the very fabric of their relationship. Afterward, as they lay tangled in the blankets, their breathing heavy and their hearts still racing, they didn't speak. There were no words for what had just happened, no apologies or excuses. They just held each other, the reality of their newfound bond sinking in. A silence stretched on, filled with unspoken promises and fears. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and they both knew that their lives would never be the same. The future was uncertain, but in that moment, all that mattered was the here and now, the warmth of their bodies and the beat of their hearts, and the ways they could never have imagined. They reached over, touched each other in ways they could never have imagined. As the night deepened, their passion grew stronger, a fiery need that consumed them both. Sophia and Liam were no longer just mother and son. They had become two souls intertwined in a love so profound, it threatened to consume them completely. In the stillness of the night, their whispered words of comfort and devotion became a soothing balm to their weary hearts, a declaration that defied the boundaries of their roles. When the soft light of dawn crept into the house, Sophia awoke to find Liam's arms still wrapped protectively around her. His steady, calm breathing was a source of comfort, and she knew in that moment she could never let him go. The guilt that had once plagued her was now replaced by a fierce determination, a possessiveness that coursed through her veins. Liam was hers to love, hers to protect from the storm she knew was inevitable. Throughout the day, their eyes met frequently, sharing unspoken truths and silent vows. They avoided speaking of the night before, as if uttering the words aloud would shatter the delicate world they had built together. Yet, beneath the surface, a growing tension coiled tighter with every heartbeat, the clock ticking toward the moment they would have to confront their reality. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join our journey. Stay tuned for more captivating tales, and let's unravel the mysteries together.